All right, everybody. Welcome to the Stronger You Project podcast episode number 1. I'm here with one of my most favorite human beings on the planet. I would like everybody to meet Mr. Dai Manuel, the ultimate super dad, husband extraordinaire, who I really like on his bio is also dating his wife. Really smart man, this guy is. He's an all around life enthusiast. Dai is on a mission to inspire and positively impact 1 million role models across the globe, encouraging them to lead a functionally healthy life through education, community, and much encouragement. As an award winning digital thought leader and author, Dai has mastered leading by example, always staying true to his values of fitness, family, faith, finances, and fun. He knows firsthand how challenging it can be to juggle life's responsibilities while prioritizing health and happiness. But don't let his impressive resume fool you. Dai's infectious personality and contagious enthusiasm truly sets him apart. He's a sought-after lifestyle mentor, executive performance coach, and keynote speaker who will leave you feeling inspired, motivated, and ready to take on the world. He is also a TEDx speaker. But more than that, he's an amazing human being. He's a guy I'm proud to call a buddy of mine. He actually wrote the foreword in my book, and he makes it maybe look a little better than it is. But that's what he does. He pours out his heart. I would like everyone to meet Mr. Dai Manuel. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Hey, man, I'm Justin. You know me. You reached out, said, "Hey, here's the deal. This is what I'm doing. Would you like to be a part of it?" I was like, "Hell yeah!" So, that's sort of how we operate. But I'm proud of you, man, and the journey you've been on is nothing short of awesome. It's been filled and riddled, really, with lots of highs, but also equal amount of lows. And yet, here you are, man, constantly putting one foot before the other, and more importantly, leading by example what's possible for all of us, so I just see your podcast as another extension. We all get to be a little fly on the wall and listen in on some of these great conversations and insights, and like anything, it becomes wisdom when we take the knowledge that's shared and we apply it to our own lives to create the shifts that we're looking to make, right? So thank you for the opportunity to be here today, and thank you for creating this platform. It's great. It's absolutely great.
Well, yeah, we met about 4 years ago, and you've definitely
Yeah,
been there through my highs, through my lows, through my struggles, through living in the Ronald McDonald House, and when I finally actually got to meet you person to person.
that's right.
And you've been there to support me, and I'm really appreciative that you're my first guest. I made sure that you were my first guest. Now, this
Uh,
podcast is all about recovery,
mm,
resilience, and redemption. And I know a bit about your story. I've never heard a whole full podcast of just your story from beginning to end. You were
mm.
my coach. And so you always made sure it was all about me. Now, today, I want to turn that around. I'm going to make it all about you because I know you are a plethora of wisdom and knowledge. Anytime I needed something, you're like, I have something for that. Oh, hey, JB, I got something for that too. So, based on resiliency, redemption, and recovery, and what I know a little bit about your past, why don't you
Mm.
take my listeners on a journey and tell us, how did you become an author, a TEDx speaker, a business coach, a fitness trainer, and a man who's dating his wife?
Well, thanks, Justin. Yeah, let's just start with the small stuff first, right? No, I'm just joking. Yeah, man, listen, we all have these great journeys. And I think it's important to note that journeys are rarely a straight line. It's a lot of back and forth, up and down, and sometimes it involves us going backwards before we can go forwards again. And I'm certainly no stranger to that. And things really started to take hold for me, especially more on the negative side of things. Like that first real significant experience with life being hard. We all can appreciate that sentiment, right? Like, life is hard. It is. It's worth it too. When you have those high moments, those amazing connection moments, those moments like when your kids are first born, or you see them walk or smile for the first time, and you know that you had something that contributed that emotions that they're feeling right now, and that's just incredible. But we can't appreciate the good if we haven't experienced a little bit of the hard. And at age 9, I remember when my parents separated, because we always hear about the childhood trauma impact it has on our life, throughout our lives. And I didn't always believe that. I'll be perfectly frank. I was like, I just always believed that I had a strong mindset that, yeah, I won't let that stuff bother me. But of course it did. And I think there's a lot of us out there that are like, yeah, what happened when I was a kid? It was when I was a kid. Moving onward and upward. I don't let that bug me anymore. I'm past that. But more often than not, we're not. And I wasn't. And it's amazing because for 25 years I was in denial. Until I couldn't ignore it any longer. Because it came to a place where I was going to lose everything that was important to me: my family, my business, my sense of self. And to be fair, if I continued down the path that I was on, I would have lost my life. And this is my story, but my story is very similar to most of our stories. And that's the cool thing when we start opening up, getting a little vulnerable with these stories or the retelling of what we've experienced. You start to see people, often the weeds, so to speak, often the sidelines, start putting up their hands saying, oh my gosh, me too. Like, think about, since you've published your book, Justin, how many people have come out of the woodwork to say, gosh, Justin, thank you for sharing your story. I've been experiencing something very similar. And I haven't been able to put things into focus enough to see the path of change in front of me. Thank you for showing me what worked for you or what path you took. Because I too, I want to start taking that path. And so, as much as I'm going to get into it, I got to just say, Justin, life is full of challenges, but man, a lot of them are fun because they're just, again, those opportunities to show ourselves that we are capable, and we are more capable than often we believe ourselves to be. And at age 9, my parents separated, ultimately divorced a couple of years after. And during that time, it was very dramatic for me because I didn't know how to express the feelings I was going through as a kid. And back then in the mid 80s, there wasn't the internet like we have today. There was a heavy stigmatization towards divorce. Not like today. We fast forward 40 years later and wow, most relationships actually end in divorce rather than succeed, in love, which is a sorry state as far as I'm concerned. But we are way more open to the conversation now. So back then, I turned inward. I became extremely introverted, and I figured out how to manipulate my feelings, my emotional state, my psychological state by doing certain actions. And these actions include eating foods that were very poor in nutrition, yet high in calories, as some people might refer to as our guilty pleasures. Well, that was just my normal. I was eating a lot of very sugary, very processed foods because it made me in the instant feel better. It was a great form of escape.
The instant gratification.
Yeah, instant, like immediately I felt better, and I could ignore any of the challenges or negative feelings I had at that moment because this biological shift would happen very quickly, and it would affect my psyche. I'd feel better in the moment. But sure enough, that stuff fades fairly quickly too. And so you find yourself in this endless loop of constantly chasing that dopamine hit, that high, if you will, that moment of relief. And anybody that can speak to addiction and addiction recovery knows what I'm talking about. We're chasing the high, and that high is a whole pile of things, but it's basically just that dopamine registering in our brain, right? Like making us feel good in the moment, and it doesn't matter what cost it comes at. And for me, at age 9, I was reinforced very quickly, and I started to realize, wow, okay, I can deal with this. I can make myself feel better anytime I want by eating certain things. Now, on top of that, when I looked at activities, lifestyle choices, I started playing a lot of video games and watching a lot of movies. Again, dopamine, right? It's this instant way of centering in on one activity, ignoring everything else around me, and feeling good. And yet, as soon as I unplugged, quite literally and metaphorically speaking, from those things, I'd start to feel bad again. And so I want more of that, right?
So
Yeah.
at 10 years old, 9, 10, 11,
Yeah.
you were mentally aware that these things made you feel good and that you needed these things in your life?
I wouldn't be, listen, I don't think I would have been aware of the negative impact it was having,
Okay.
because in the moment, I mean, I'm freaking 9 to 12 to ultimately to 15 years old, there's almost a 6-year period there where that was my normal. And I didn't expect anything of it. But, I was putting the weight on,
Mm,
to the point that at age 15, visiting the doctor with my mom, and, he's pulling my mom aside and it's like, yeah, Dai's morbidly obese.
mm,
For those that are aware of BMI and that index, body mass index, my body mass index was well into the 40s, which is very, 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 very high and very unhealthy, and especially for someone of my youth at that time, right? And it was creating a lot of psychological challenges, physical challenges, but the mental health impact was the worst. Very low self-opinion, very introverted. I avoided big social settings because every time I'd walk into a social environment, especially with people I didn't know, I'd instantly feel like I was being judged,
mm.
or ridiculed. I'd see people snickering. I'd automatically think that it was about me. And that was just my state. That was, again, my normal. So, it's hard to be in that kind of a place. Anybody that's lived in that state of unhealth or dealt with chronic ailments, I get it. I totally get it. It's not easy.
Let, let me ask you
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've totally been there where I would walk into a room and I would project
Mhm.
conversations into my friends' heads. This is what they're
Right.
thinking about me. Oh, you're a failure. You're
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
that. Right? How
Yeah.
often can we be
Yeah.
walking down the street? You look over at somebody. Oh, they're thinking this about me when it's really us thinking about we think about ourselves. Um,
Correct.
what was
Mhm.
your? You talked a little bit about your internal. What was your internal dialogue at that point? Is that can make or break us.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, my internal dialogue was I have zero value.
Yeah.
I am not somebody that people would be attracted to, because obviously, as coming into my early teen years, I was looking at the other guys in my classes. I was looking at the girls, I eventually came to a place where I decided to make some changes, and truth be told, if we're talking about that extrinsic motivator, one of my extrinsic motivations was I wanted a girlfriend, and more importantly, after I've unpacked this now, many, many years later, it's because I wanted somebody to want me. I wanted to feel I had something of value, that I was lovable, that I was desirable. Because at that point, I didn't desire myself. And that's how I felt about myself. So, you talk about that projection. Well, it was my actions or inactions that would reinforce that. And, confirmation bias, especially when we start understanding belief systems, it's very real. And as children, though, we don't know any better, right? We form these beliefs early on, and we constantly look to reinforce that belief. And anytime we have somebody outside of us, especially somebody that we see as an authority or as a role model type figure, if they have something negative to say to us and that complements or enhances what we already believe about ourselves, it just solidifies that belief even more. This is why role models and mentors for children is so impactful, both positively but also negatively at times. And like there's a great documentary that just came out about Boy Scouts of America, right? That came out on Netflix. And if anybody watches that, oh my goodness, there's some challenges there, and I'm not going to speak to that, but it's just, again, a very present representation of these roles that sometimes we find adults in, and the impact we can make in a child's life. And back then I didn't really have any positive role models, and because, again, I was very introverted. I was looking to escape from the world and make my own little world that I felt better in. And then you do whatever you can to shield that, right? And at age 15, though, I became very, very aware of my state of
Okay.
unhealth.
Now, what
You
switched?
know,
What made that
well,
mindset switch? That hey, was it the I want a girlfriend part?
no, I
I don't
mean,
want to be alone, or
that's one of the motivations for sure.
yeah,
But I had a vision of what I was going to be like at 20, because it was easy for me to recognize from age 10 to age 15, life got hard and
mm,
harder and very hard. And it was due to my choice of actions or what I wasn't doing. And I had this idea that I want to be like everybody else. I want to be healthier because I believed everybody else was healthier and fitter and happier as a result. That's what I believed. I believed everybody but me felt better. And it's obviously they have this thing. And if you were healthy, life would be better. And I had attributed physical health to that, the external, what we see kind of health. And because again, at that age, that's just what I believed. What you see is what the truth is. And obviously now I'm probably a little bit more cynical, but that was sort of my position and my perspective. But I became hyper afraid of the idea of not changing.
Hyper
I was
afraid.
more afraid of not changing than the idea of like, hey, I do want to make some changes. And yeah, it's scary to think about changing things. It's scary to think about trying to learn to do something new, to educate yourself, to teach yourself how to do something completely different than you've been doing it. There's a lot of intimidation with that idea. I mean, look at people when they go to a gym for the first time. Like, kudos to you. You went in. My gosh, talk about intimidation, right? I still coach CrossFit classes, and I look at people that come into CrossFit for the very first time, and I'm like, hey, did you Google this? And they go, yeah, I did. And I like, and you still came in? It's like, whoa, it's like, because it's intimidating. It implies a whole lot of change, and it also it puts a spotlight on the areas that we just don't know, both about ourselves and the world. And it's intimidating and scary and yeah. But here I am at age 15, and I became hyper afraid that by 20 things weren't going to be any better than how I was experiencing 15. And I didn't like how I was experiencing 15. So that was like, oh my gosh, I've got to make some changes and make them now. And that's what I did. I made a decision that I'm going to get healthy. I had no idea how I was going to do it. I wasn't so quick to try to quantify or qualify the hows, the whats, the whens. I just knew that I do not want to be like I am anymore. And from what I understand is that people that exercise are typically healthier. People that play sports, people that move their bodies a lot seem to be healthier. So I had this belief that if I start to exercise, start to move my body, I will start to see some positive changes. But I also recognized that the nutrition that I was using as my fuel wasn't a good option as well. And so I had to educate myself. I remember going to the library to get books out on fitness and on nutrition. And even that afternoon, when I had that question, I came to my dad and I'm like, Dad, I want to get healthy. Here, morbidly obese teen, going to his father, who I only see every other weekend sometimes, and sometimes it would be longer. We weren't the closest, but we loved each other regardless, and thankfully he saw something in me in that moment that was like, whoa, strike the iron while it's hot. Like Dai's clearly motivated at this exact moment to do something. And because they've been encouraging me to try to make some changes, like when you see your child sad, what do you want to do? You want to make them happy. So you make all of these suggestions, but every time they came to me offering help, I thought, oh, you're just saying I'm not good enough the way I am. You want me to change. Like, and that again, I mean, I'm sure there's people listening to this like, oh gosh, I know exactly how you feel. I totally get that, because we recognize that we do want to make some changes, but we don't like other people acknowledging that they want to see us make those changes. It's like, listen, I don't need you to tell me I need to make changes because I know I need to make changes. I don't need you to tell me that I'm unhealthy. I know I'm unhealthy. And so that was sort of this dichotomy I found myself in. And sure enough, my dad was very supportive, took me out to buy a mountain bike that afternoon, because I always remembered as a kid, I used to love riding my bike outside. I used to like that activity. And the idea of riding a bike was far less intimidating than the idea of trying to go get a gym membership and going to these gyms. As a morbidly obese teen, going into something that's all steel and plastics and mirrors, and back then they were all wearing the MC Hammer pants, and the gyms in the 80s were quite the sight to be seen. Okay, and I was like, no thank you, I don't want to go there. And
tell me how old you are without telling me how old you are.
Totally, man.
MC Hammer pants.
Oh, you just remember those parachute pants? Like, oh my gosh, like that. And then the spaghetti strap tank tops, right? That would be like, oh, it doesn't even cover your nipples as a guy. It's just like, but that was the standard. And you'd have a fanny pack, of course. And the high top shoes, because that's what everybody wore at the gym. And if guys had long hair, they also had a bandana. But I did not want to do that. And so the idea of doing something on my own was also much safer for me. I felt safer making that choice. And I started riding my bike every day. I then educated myself on the kind of foods I should be eating or not eating. And I just started to empower myself with knowledge. And I started to apply a little bit of what I was learning, just a little bit every day. Sure enough, 20 months later, I released all the weight and I literally became much healthier, much more confident, but still on the inside, I was still feeling like that morbidly obese teenager. Internally speaking, I still had that because I didn't do any internal work. Okay. I mean, I'm 15 years old. I know that I want to make some changes, but my big extrinsic motivation was I just want a girlfriend, like that. That's like the epitome of my change. I'll know I'll have done it if a girl wants me for me, and then there's that intimacy that comes with that. Like that, then I'll know I made it. And sure enough, by 17, I had a girlfriend and all that other stuff. So I got some validation from that. But when I was by myself, alone, look in the mirror, look at photos, I still felt like that little obese kid.
So is that part of, because I've felt like that before, like because I was a skinnier kid growing up, and now I'm 6'3", I'm 235-ish, but I've saw that skinny kid.
Yeah.
Now, is that body dysmorphia? Is that not doing the internal work? I don't feel that way now, but I know when I started working out and I got up to that bigger weight, like I knew that I was a big guy. The scale said it, but I still felt I could still see that skinny kid sometimes. Now with you, is it body dysmorphia, or I don't know much about that. I just know it's a thought pattern.
Yes, there certainly was elements of that. And even today, like I'm much more mindful of that. I'm more aware of those tendencies. Not to say that it's ever gone away completely. It's still there, but it's not my dominating thoughts. And it's actually the thoughts that I can recognize. It's like, oh, there's that silly thought again. Hello, goodbye. Because I'm much more aware of who I am and who I'm becoming and who I want to be seen as. So that self-accountability is much clearer now, but it's only because I've done a lot of work. Okay. Like a lot of work. It's not like I woke up one day and I was like, oh, okay, I got it all figured out. I mean, hell no. I wish it was that easy. I wish it was like the Matrix. I could just plug in and they download all the info I need to know, but we don't live in that world yet. And as a result, it takes time, it takes a lot of energy, and it takes commitment and frequency to see change through. To establish a new normal, you have to override the old normal. Cool thing is, science has proven, neuroscience has said, hey, our brains are neuroplastic. It has this element of neuroplasticity, which means that we can override old beliefs and old patterns and create new ones that can replace those. Behavior change, habit change, eventually become a lifestyle change. But it doesn't happen easily, and it takes a lot of effort. And the longer the normal's been a normal, the longer the change will take. And, so for me, it took me 5 years to get to my largest. It took me just under 2 years to let it go. So, when I think about change, like that was my first real experience with personal change that I was the agent for, and agency is very important for all of us, right? That ability to be able to recognize that we have the ability to make changes for ourselves when we want to, and that was a valuable lesson for me. But unfortunately, that inner work, it never got done. I remember going to a party because I started getting more attention, right? And I was seeking validation, Justin, to be perfectly honest. It was a big thing I was always looking for because, I didn't feel like I had value to offer. So all of a sudden I'd have people, giving me attention, girls giving me attention, other guys giving me attention. And I was like feeling validated for some of the physical changes, but internally I still felt like that kid and kind of like an imposter, right? I have the language to identify that now, but back then I just didn't feel, I felt like I'd be figured out soon enough, that people would figure out, oh, I used to be that fat kid, and they'll judge me for it. And so there was always these sort of fears. And then I was given a couple drinks at a party. And dude, it was like instant. It reminded me of when I would eat certain types of foods or play video games. I could influence that state of being very quickly. And here it was, all those little negative thoughts that were circling in my head and those beliefs that I had about myself. 2 drinks in, it was like they weren't present anymore. And in fact, I felt like talking to other people. I felt like being a bit outgoing. I felt like, oh, that girl that's been looking at me, I'm going to go talk to her. You know, they talk about liquid courage, right? And the cliche is true. It's very true. Like inhibitions drop when we introduce alcohol, and that's what happened with me. And I liked it. And I got validation from people because all of a sudden I'd be invited to go to other parties. I get invited on a date, you know, and I'd be like, well, clearly the alcohol helped me do that. And these people want that guy, that version of me, to show up. And so all of a sudden, this belief in me that, man, that's the person that people prefer hanging out with, this different persona, this persona of when alcohol's in my system, you know, I gave it the moniker later in life called Fun Guy Die, you know, and that's who I believe people wanted to hang out with. That's who I believe people valued. And so, you know, constantly reinforcing some of those beliefs, and I was seeking proof every chance I could, and constantly getting it every time I go out and party, have a few drinks, and something positive, or I would think it was positive, would happen, but it'd be enough for me to then solidify that again, that belief. So all of a sudden, you know, moving into my 20s, you know, I started building a company. I got into selling fitness equipment because as a trainer, I was exchanging hours for dollars. And I was like, this is going to be really hard to have a healthy lifestyle where I can have a family, you know, and consistency with income. And so I got into equipment sales where it was performance-based pay. The more people I helped by buying the right equipment to give them the positive results that they want, the more money that the company would pay me. And I was like, this is awesome. You know, like I'd work a set amount of schedule, but based on performance, every week I'd make more than I made the week previously. And I was like, wow, I like this. This is cool, you know? And so I went all in on learning sales and marketing and management and leadership. And so this professional development was awesome. I loved it because it had, again, another way of being validated. And through that was income and recognition from my peers that I was working with. Again, seeking that validation. That was constant. So I got into the professional development, but self-development, screw that. I ain't doing that. That's like woo-woo stuff. I forget it. I'll just become, you know, the best professional I can. And sure, I want to be a dad. I want to be a husband. I want to be a community leader. I want to be all these things. And I'm sure if I get the professional accolades and success, all that will be present. Not really understanding, you know, what it actually takes to change and to live into values. So, you know, fast forward a lot of years, I was very functional, but this alcohol was very prominent for 15 years of my life. From age 17 to 32, alcohol was always present. But that was normal. All my professional peers and my social peers, they were doing the same thing. You know, so when you think about how we learn as human beings, we learn through modeling and mentorship. Well, the modeling that was happening around me, I was just doing what everybody else was doing. So it just seemed normal. And mentorship wise, my professional mentors at that time, because I didn't have personal mentors, but I had professional mentors. This is the normal for them. Suppliers come into town. We go to conferences. It's like, it's a big freaking party, you know? And here I am in the fitness industry. Talk about a complete contrast, right? It's like you think going to a fitness conference, you know, that it would be very healthy and very positive. You know, no. it had elements of that, but it also had a lot of the other darker elements. You know, it was like this, we let ourselves loose at these conferences, and but it was actually just the lifestyle.
Well, you know, it's they normalize alcohol so much that everywhere you go, there's alcohol, and it just reminded me of something. I've never actually looked at it this way because you're talking about fitness, and you're talking about alcohol. I'm like, we go to these, you know, sports events where we watch these fantastically in shape athletes, and we celebrate them by drinking and watching them. So we drink alcohol while we watch these in shape people. That's how we're celebrating them, like putting substances into our body. And I never actually thought about that before, but it brings everybody together. Going to a sports function, gonna celebrate with alcohol. Gonna go to a conference on fitness, let's celebrate with alcohol. It's crazy how our society has came to that, to celebrate fitness with alcohol.
Normalized social behavior, right? Like it's so ingrained in our lifestyles that it's hard to get away from it. You know, you almost seem like the odd person out if you have a different belief around that. And But again, I really believe it's personal choice. I'm never gonna, question someone's motives or habits, unless they themselves question them first, right? If there's an open discussion or dialogue around like, hey, I want to make some changes, it's like, well, why? And what changes are you wanting to make? Like you have to get to a place where you yourself want to make the changes before the changes even begin to happen, right? And that was something that became very, very present too. And because thinking back, the only reason why I got healthy as that 15-year-old was because I finally got to a place where I decided I wanted to make a change. Fast forward at 32 years old, life is getting really, really challenging because I'm juggling a lot more. The business has grown. I think right around that time we were doing 8 or 9 million a year in retail sales. Like we were booming, and doing really well. And so professionally, from the outside looking in, everyone thought, wow, Dad's got it together. He's got 2 beautiful daughters. He's got this great relationship with his wife, Christy. I'm doing a lot of public initiative type work, volunteering and fundraising. So I'm checking all the boxes. But on the flip side, I've got this secret in a way, where I'm constantly seeking validation. And the easiest way for me to get validation was through alcohol, being social in an alcohol-induced setting and getting that attention and getting the affirmations and confirmations, that I'm a cool guy and I'm a person that people want to hang out with.
Yeah, no, these aren't self affirmations. These are
No.
other people affirmations. Yeah.
Totally. And that was just normal, and then at 32, I came home one night after just an all-night bender. I don't remember how I got home, but I do remember waking up on the Berber carpet the next morning, face down, and it's like 11 a.m., like not even quite noon yet, but my family's been up for hours, and I'm like beside the bed on the floor. And I'm laughing at it. And it's not, I probably shouldn't be laughing at it, but this is almost 15 years removed now, like even when I tell this story, it's almost like I'm envisioning a TV rerun, right? Like I forget that that's me. That was me in that story. And that's the positive effect of change. Over time, we're okay with it, because we have to work through the understanding, of what brought us there, but also what pulled us out of it. Because again, I am that common denominator between all these points, right? Is me, and this is my story, and these are what I experienced, and hopefully in sharing that, other people can see their own experience in that, and I got to say, my wife sat me down and we started talking about what life was going to be like to co-parent our kids, because she was like, and both of our daughters at this time were under the age of 6. We had been together for about 10 years, Christy and I. And she had put up with me, okay, in a really big way, because when I wasn't drinking, I was the person that she fell in love with. But when I would get too many drinks into me, I was always fun and good and attentive, and I thought very positive, because I was constantly reminded about how positive and what a great guy I was to party with, so I had this belief about myself, and almost like a little bit of pride around that. Like it's crazy, like, because I would defend it, right? Especially with Christy, she'd say like, like you get to this place where you just drink a few too many drinks, and it's just like the whole night's a write-off, and then you got a couple days after to recover, and like, do you think there's a problem there? And I would just say, no, there's no problem. Like I'd be very aggressive and defensive, and all she was trying to do was, again, like a loved one that sees somebody hurting. She's like, when I see you hurt, I hurt. I'm just trying to help. I was like, no, you want me to change, right? Like, it's just like, oh man, it's just
like your parents wanted you to.
Dude, totally. I mean, it's so funny. Like, and it's not like ha ha ho ho. It's like just funny that we put ourselves through this stuff, right? And anyways, we, after a couple hours of us sitting at the kitchen table, and tears were being shed on both sides, we get to a place where, I'm like, listen, I really want us to work. I'm not ready to throw the towel in. And to be fair, she wasn't either, but she was bringing it up. It's like, we can't continue down this path any longer, because this is not the environment our daughters deserve to be brought up in. And I knew she was right. in that statement. It hurt to admit that she was right. But then she asked me a question, Justin, and this is the question. And I know you've heard this before because you've heard my TED Talk, but the question she asked me was, Dai, are you being the type of man that you'd want to marry your daughters?
Man, when I heard you say that in that TEDx talk, and
yeah,
so I met you, I knew you. We still
yeah.
started working together, and I heard you say that in a TEDx speech, and just the vulnerability that you showed there. I was like, holy cow, because this speech is going to be heard by men everywhere, everywhere, all over the world. And he's standing up there, and you just said, "Are you?" My wife asked me, "Are you being the man that you want your daughters to date?"
And it was crazy, okay? Because in that moment when she asked me that, there's a little part of me that wanted to scream and yell at her, for sure. There was like, what are you saying here? You mean, of course I'm that guy. Like there was that instant sort of knee-jerk reaction internally where I would just felt like, quite frankly, ripping her head off. Okay.
Yeah.
And like, I'm just being honest, like I felt all that emotion start to percolate up, right? Like this anger. But it wasn't for her. It was for myself. And the fact that I knew deep down she was 100% right.
Mm.
She was 100% right. I wasn't being that guy. I had moments of being that guy, but I wasn't consistently showing up as that guy. In fact, if I look at what I was modeling to my kids and how I was mentoring those that were closest to me, both personally and professionally, it wasn't something to be proud of. As much as I would do a lot of good things, Justin, the things I was doing that weren't in alignment with that would undermine the value of all the good.
Absolutely.
And I was never truly aware of that. I would justify my actions by saying, well, look, I did all these good things. I deserve a night out or a weekend out. I deserve a nice trip. I deserve to let things loose, like I would justify the negative based on all the positive I was doing. But the truth be told, doesn't matter how good the good is, when you're doing the stuff that completely undermines its value, it brings the good down to that level. And I became really aware of that, right? And it was crazy because in that moment, I remember just thinking, gosh, I want to be that guy. I've always said that's who I wanted to be, who I always believed I was actively becoming, even though I wasn't always showing up like that. And I made a commitment to Christy and my two daughters right then and there. I was going to go 1 year without drinking. No alcohol in my body for a year. I know there's people listening to this being like, Dai, you sound like you were an alcoholic. You sound like somebody that probably should have gone and maybe got some additional type of support, and maybe show up to some meetings, etc. And I'm not here to talk about 12-step programs or this, that, or the other, but I am here to acknowledge that I recognized I had a challenge. And it was a challenge I wanted to make some changes. Before that, any big changes I wanted to make, I seemed to be able to make on my own. I had some support around me, but it was really me driving the change. So here I was believing I could do it again. And I figured out in less than 6 weeks of starting down that path, I realized, holy crap, this is way harder than I thought it was going to be.
It's the pink cloud sets in.
Dude, it was great for the first few weeks, right? And then things got really heavy and really hard because I didn't have any healthy coping mechanisms. And my primary form of escape, which was a 15-year habit, I had now said no to. I'm not doing that anymore. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do? I can exercise. I can do all these other things that they talk about doing, but it's not making me feel better. And I finally truly got vulnerable with Christy one night on the couch. This is, within that first 2 months of going no alcohol. And I just did this verbal diarrhea, just like blah, 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 all over her. Okay. Like I shared everything that was going on in my head and going on in my heart. And it was the first time I'd been truly honest with her, like 100% sharing how I'm feeling, how I perceive myself, what I think when I'm around certain types of people. Like I shared it all. And she was amazing. She held space for me to do that. No judgment. She just allowed me to go, took it on. And at the end of that, she looks at me and she says, you know what? I think you should talk to somebody, like, and I'm like, what? I thought I was talking to someone. I'm talking to you. And she's like, no, I want to support you with this, but I think you need to talk to somebody that's a professional in this space, somebody that can really help you unpacking this and repack it. And maybe also giving you some steps to follow that are different than what you're trying to do on your own. The voice of reason again, right? And initially I was like this should just be enough. I don't need that. I don't need to see a therapist. I don't need that help. Like, no, I'm 32. I got my shit together. I don't need that. Like I had this real negative opinion, on mental health support, especially because I believed I could do it on my own. And I believed that people would judge me, and crazy, right? All these sort of misbeliefs and false beliefs, but that was obviously validated through some of my spheres of influence. The people I was hanging out with that were also big drinkers and partiers. Of course, they would speak negatively about any of that stuff because they don't have problems, right?
Yeah.
They don't need help for that stuff because there's nothing wrong here. And so, again, you don't know what you don't know, right? And so I agreed. A little bit sheepishly and not fully, but I said, you know what? Okay, I'll speak to somebody. And I found a psychologist and I worked with him for, I don't know, not even 6 months. Found a relationships counselor, worked with them for about 3 or 4 months, and I went all in on all the literature. Like I went to a couple 12-step programs thinking that maybe I'm an alcoholic. Maybe this is something bigger than me and something I really need to find a community of people that are dealing with this kind of struggle and change. And I realized, more I got into the literature and this 12-step programs, I realized I wasn't a fit for that. And I'm not here to knock the program. For a lot of people, it's been a lifesaver, right? It's been the change that they needed, the community they needed. But for me, I found I had a problem with trying to admit to myself that I was powerless, when it came to my alcohol consumption. Because I got to be honest with you, Justin, I was fully aware of every time I decided to drink, every time I decided to turn my phone off so I could tell my wife, hey, my phone died. Sorry, I lost track of time, baby. Like I was aware of all those decisions. Every one of them. Alcohol didn't make me make those. I made those freely, and I was always valuing the way I would feel on alcohol over what I already truly mattered in my life. So it was a value proposition for me. And I had to learn how to really start to live my values the way I wanted to. And, working with those professionals really helped me unpack and repack that experience as a kid, being morbidly obese, some of those limiting beliefs that were ruling my life at that time. And sure enough, I went all in on that inner work. Just like when I went all in from age 15 to 17, I went all in on the physical work. I made all these amazing health changes. I got super fit, healthy, vibrant, like I just was active and people saw that change and I got, praise for that change. I felt good about it. So, I knew I could do external change. I had no idea how to do the internal stuff. And that's where finding somebody to help me really made that possible. And then, fast forward, I got to the end of that year and Christy and I are sitting around talking and we're like, well, do you think you're ever going to have a drink again? And I'm like, well, I probably could. I totally feel like it's not an issue. But you know what? So much has changed in the last 12 months. Like so much, like literally everything changed in that 1 year, Justin. Everything changed because all of a sudden I realized, wow, I got a lot of extra money now. I'm not spending it all on booze. 2, I've got all this extra energy because if I actually had to look at my calendar year, for every night of heavy drinking, I would lose 2 days of productivity. So it was like all of a sudden I got an extra month of productivity. So like I had a 13th month, right, in that year.
That's a good way of looking at it.
Dude, it was crazy. Like so much had changed in a real positive way. But here's the thing. I started really liking the guy that I was seeing in the mirror. That was something new to me.
So not just physically, but mentally.
No, mentally and, physically, holistically, I really started to like me and believe that I had something to offer that was more than just a good time at a party. And that was new to me. Okay. That was new. That belief, that observation. And I liked it. And I was like, you know what, babe? What if I kept going? What if I just keep going? I was coming on 14 years. I'm in my 14th year of sobriety right now, and I mean, will I always be a non-drinker? Well, for right now, yeah. Can I speak 20 years from now? Maybe. Who knows? I don't know. I don't know. But I know I really like who I am now. I've gone through a lot of changes to get here, but there's still more change I want to make. And I look at alcohol as being a distraction from those changes. So right now, I'm not ready to drink again. I'm good, and I'll keep moving forward. And but that was some of the big stuff, right? And in that period of time of this sobriety, I was diagnosed with a chronic autoimmune disease. I left a career of 17 years, went traveling the world with my family for 5 years, lived in Bali, Indonesia for 2.5, did a TED Talk, published a book, done keynotes all over the world, connected with amazing people like you. None of that would have happened had I not decided to say no to alcohol, to say yes to the life I always wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And that's bottom line, man. Was it worth it? Hell yeah. Was it hard? Oh, hell yeah. Okay. But was it worth it? Yes, it was. Of course it was worth it, And so that's sort of it, man. That's I mean, I've covered a big span of time and
Yeah.
in 50 minutes here, but that's the gist of it.
Yeah, well, you definitely have covered a lot. You've given a lot of nuggets for my listeners to take away. I have one question. Um, when you asked for help, was it
Mhm.
scary? Did you just say, okay, and then you asked? Did it take you a week, a month to ask? What was it like to actually go to a professional and say, hey, I'm not okay?
Well, after I had that conversation with Christy, and that was my first, after I opened up to her and I realized, wow, that wasn't that bad. Because also during that time, that 6-week period after I made a commitment to go 1 year without drinking, I spoke to my business partner, I spoke to a lot of my professional associates that I worked with and alongside, and I let them know this is something I'm committing to.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really get into the why behind it. I just said, this is a decision I'm making for myself. I'm going to go a year without drinking. I want to really lean into making some positive change, but I didn't really elaborate on what was going on. I didn't, to be fair, feel that they were deserving of that vulnerability.
Okay.
Now that's how I can describe it now, but back then I just didn't trust them.
Mm.
I didn't trust them. Brene Brown's really good with this stuff, right? Brene Brown, like she talks about, vulnerability needs to be earned, right? And it's just not something we give away freely without that level of trust, understanding, compassion. Like it's people aren't just arbitrarily deserving of someone else's vulnerability. And I think we can all truly admit that to be true, if we think about our own experience with being vulnerable. It's a skill that we all have, but has it been nurtured in a positive way, or has it been nurtured in a negative way? Because again, our beliefs around being vulnerable will be tainted based on that experience. All it takes is us being vulnerable, like, really putting our heart on the line and saying, you know what, like, think about this in romantic relationships, right? We think about that first real crush that we have, and we finally get the courage up to say to them, hey, I like you. Would you like to go out with me? And then the person's like, no, I don't dig you that way. Oh, 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 I'm crushed. I can never talk to another girl ever again. But that would then now influence my beliefs around being vulnerable, especially around that sort of emotional vulnerability to somebody I'm attracted to.
Mm-hmm.
We think about those experiences in our own life and how it formulates and reinforces some of our beliefs. This happens all the time. Like, once you start to understand habit formation and belief systems and how they're formed, but more importantly, how are they solidified? Like, how does the cement set? Because it takes work to to unearth some of that, and to reestablish new, healthier beliefs around some things. And vulnerability is a tough one. It really is. And that's why I always encourage people, find a safe space or a community, find a good mentor, a coach, somebody that you can start practicing opening up to. Fortunately for me, I did it with my wife, and then she was very right in saying, I think you should speak to a professional. She was
Mm-hmm.
right in saying that, as much as I didn't want to agree to it right then and there. I did, because bottom line, I knew that it was something I wanted, and I needed some help. I needed support, and what I was doing wasn't working. And that first sit down with that psychologist, it was tough. I was very standoffish. I was slow to admit why I was there. But halfway through the session, it got to a place where all of a sudden I realized he's just a guy. He's a guy that's got a lot of experience in this. He's asking some very thought-provoking questions. I want to see these changes through, so I'm going to be as honest as I can with him. I just decided to trust the process and trust the individual that was taking me through the process. And then I went all in with it. And I think that's also why the changes happened rather quickly. You know, it was 15 years of drinking. The longest I'd ever gone is 1 month. I'd done a sober January once or twice, but really alcohol was always present for 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, you know, within 1 year, not only was it gone, but everything changed. It's, and I'm not saying this is as a testament to my own ability to change. That's not the case. It's just when you make the decision to go all in on change and you start to do the things that are going to start to create the change, you'll be surprised how fast it can happen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like really, it can happen really quick. So I'm the kind of guy that's like, why do it slow? Like, why put yourself through that agony? You know, just get it done, rip the Band-Aid off, and go all in on the change and see what happens. You know, see what happens. And,
So when you told your friends, were they supportive?
Yes and no. Some were, some weren't. Like some just didn't know how to engage with me anymore, because you know the way that we would bond was always with alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it was going golfing, whether it was watching UFC at the pub, even going out with a supplier when they're in town, taking out some of the sales guys, you know, alcohol was always present. In some of the professional settings, it wasn't as big of a deal, but in the personal settings, it was challenging. Because as I was going through this change, again, you know, my early 30s, I started craving deeper connection. I took the alcohol away and I'm like, well, I want to talk. I want to connect. But I'm still trying to hang out with all these drinkers. And they want nothing to do with that. You know, and fair enough. You know, here I'm trying to influence them to make some positive changes too, because I was making some changes, seeing all the good that it was creating in my life. And I was like, man, I value you guys, you're friends. Like, I think you'd really like this too. What do you think? You know, and they weren't in that place. And this is where I came up with that idea. You know, it's like, if you want to change the people around you, sometimes you just got to change the people around you. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, change your association. And that's what I did. I found new association, people that weren't, I didn't have an existing relationship that was already heavily influenced by alcohol. And that's what I needed. That's what I had to find. And unfortunately for me, I found Toastmasters. I found some networking organizations. You know, I really started to do certain things. I started to build some communities online that was very health minded, very specific on the values. And I was like, hey, if you're people that align with these values, then hey, let's join this community together and help each other. You know, and it also was the early seeds that became my book later, you know, were all these aspects of what I was working on and focusing on. But you have to be prepared when you go through the change. Not everybody is going to be open to it or ready for it. But it doesn't matter about them. Mm-hmm. And I know there's going to be people listening to this and going, what do you mean it doesn't matter about them? Aren't you making the change for them? No, I'm making the change for me. But of course, the happy byproduct is the people that I care about most also benefit from that change. But I got to want to make it for me first, you know? And cool thing is once you go down that path, you realize that, man, I'm more capable of things than I ever expected I was. Yeah. You know, I'm constantly learning new things about myself as a result of this journey I've been on for these almost 15 years, you know, and I don't begrudge it for a second. It's been amazing. It's been some hard stuff too, but I wouldn't trade any of it away for that one decision to say no to alcohol so I could say yes to everything else that's happened, you know.
Say yes to life. And you've done a lot of things.
Like lots of stuff, but that wouldn't have happened, Justin, had I not decided to remove alcohol, that crutch, you know, from my life. I honestly know we wouldn't be here talking today had I continued down that path.
Oh, me neither. I don't even know if I'd still be alive, to be honest with you. If I hadn't said, I hadn't hospitalized myself that one day and said, enough is enough.
Yeah.
You got to change. I don't know where I'd be. I probably wouldn't have another child. I would be back together with my wife. I wouldn't be in my son's life. It's crazy how one decision can change the whole scope of your life. And by making that change, I've got to meet people like yourself, people in the personal development space that just want to help other people, want to see other people grow. It's been an amazing journey. And especially getting to know you throughout that, and just to see what you've done, the programs you've built, the book you wrote, the TEDx, all the stuff you have going. Why don't you tell my listeners, what is it do you exactly do? We've been here for an hour. What does Dai do?
Listen,
Besides
I help people
talk.
with change. Help people with change. All right. Like, but I do that both personally and professionally. Because the way I look at it, and the kind of people I tend to work best with and support best are people that have direction in their life already, but they're realizing that where they want to be to where they are now, if they continue doing what they're doing, it's going to be a very long journey and maybe not that much fun. And what I mean by that is we all know that we have our own weaknesses, but sometimes we're not aware of those blind spots. And so what I can typically do is, as a coach, but more importantly as a mentor, able to identify those blind spots and then also help them formulate a plan of action that allows them to see the results, but also see them happen in a way that creates a lot of fulfillment, joy, and happiness. All right. Which is not the normal feeling we get when we go through big change. Okay. When we're going through change, it's often intimidating, scary,
Uncomfortable.
hard. Yeah, uncomfortable. And sure, those are elements of it. But if you keep in mind why you're making the changes and why you're starting to do things differently, it offers a completely different aura to the change that you're navigating, a much more positive feeling and reinforced feeling. And so I love helping people with that. Like, I've been coaching people in fitness and nutrition and mindset for 30 years, so I've been doing this for quite a while. And professionally, I've built some pretty amazing things. So I have a really strong acumen when it comes to business development and scaling and marketing and sales. And so I draw on both of these experiences when I support clients. And I love doing that stuff, man, whether it's a do-it-yourself program or a small group program or even one-on-one, it doesn't matter. Or I'm doing a keynote, to a large group of people. Like, to me, that's all an opportunity to make a difference in someone's life. And I'm all for it. I'm all for it.
Well, what's next for Dai? What's Dai's big plans?
Well, I got a few things. I got some fun keynotes coming up to like the Okanagan Wise and Fraser Health Authority. So I've got some really significant talks coming up, which I'm really excited about. Outside of that, I'm launching a new community website along with all my programs. They'll be all under one roof. But also a wonderful community, launching a new site. I'm reworking my original book into a new edition, working on another book. And on top of that, I'm just trying to be the best version of me that can. And it doesn't come with a lot of challenges, but man, it's worth it. I'm not shying away from the challenges. Okay.
Can you tell my readers, or my readers, can you tell my
Yeah.
listeners how they should be readers of your book? What's your book about?
Well, the Whole Life Fitness Manifesto teaches people how to leverage 2% of every 24 hours. I know people are trying to do the math right now. It's like, 2% of 24 hours. What is that? It's 30 minutes a day. Because I know when I say it presented as 2% of your day, people are like, oh, I can do that. But if I say 30 minutes, people are like, well, I don't know if I got 30 minutes, And I laugh at it. It's just that perspective, right? But if you can make 2% of every 24 hours non-negotiable for yourself and your self-care, I've got the best formula to help you get results. And it's simple. It's 15 minutes of movement with purpose, body weight based. You got enough room to throw a towel down on the floor. You got enough room to do the workout. You follow that up with 5 minutes of mindful meditation. And then immediately after that, 20 minutes, you now do 10 minutes of focused, intentional personal development. And people are always like, well, what do you do for those 10 minutes? I'm like, well, you can listen to a great podcast like Justin's, you could listen to a TEDx talk like mine. You could talk to a teacher, a mentor, a coach. You could read a positive article, but it's something positive that enriches your life. Mm-hmm. And that's 30 minutes that will focus positive influence on your body, your mind, and your energy. And whether you call it your soul, your spirit, you can use the language that you like, but that energetic version of you as well and gets a focused intention. So, it's 30 minutes a day, 28 days straight. You commit to doing it for 28 days. You take a week off afterwards. You reflect, you introspect, you observe the changes that happened, and then you do another 28 days. And it's just a lifestyle that continues like that. People are like, well, does the program have a start and end date? I'm like, well, only if you want it to. I've seen a lot of people start with this and now they're off doing marathons. One guy climbed a mountain, people are doing mud runs. People have joined CrossFit gyms. People have just joined a gym, period. Mm-hmm. I call it sort of as that getting started type of program, or it's that first little taster you get to develop some confidence and clarity. Because once you have that confidence and clarity, your ability to take action and procrastinate less becomes very real. And that's why I created the Whole Life Fitness Manifesto. It's available Barnes and Noble in the States. It's Chapters Indigo in Canada, but Amazon everywhere. So I just encourage people, grab yourself a copy, get started. Or when the new community launches, you'll have access to not only the digital book, but also the full online program and a community of people to connect with as you're doing it. So all that launches fall of 2023, depending on when this goes out.
Amazing, man. You will be my first podcast episode. I'm hoping to release this next week. We got to get this going.
There we go. Beauty.
Yeah,
right in time.
You're going to be up. You're going to be first. Man, thank you for joining me. Before we go, I have one question. So my podcast is on recovery, redemption, resilience. We talked about your recovery. We saw your redemption. Oops, sorry. I'm getting all animated here. We saw your redemption, right?
Yeah.
What does resilience mean to you?
Well, resilience is that ability to bounce back. And what I mean by that is, like, I've thought really hard about resiliency in my own life. And just to give you like an example, so I have an autoimmune condition. It is chronic. It's always there. The hematologists figure I've had it probably most of my life, but it only was been diagnosed in the last decade. And because of my lifestyle, my healthy choices, it basically, a lot of the symptoms that would normally come up for someone with my condition just wouldn't become apparent. So it's what sort of delayed them figuring out what I had. And it's called autoimmune neutropenia. Now, where I'm going with this is, once I got the diagnosis, now I knew what it was. I know that my immune system is compromised to the point that, yeah, I am very susceptible to viral infections and bacterial infections. So you can imagine, we just came out of a pandemic. Yeah. My hematologist is like, Dai, just live in a bubble during the pandemic, right? And I'm like, I'm not living in a bubble. I can't do burpees in a bubble. So I was I wasn't very warm to that idea. But here's the thing. I know there's certain things that I do every day, okay, that include certain ways that I eat, certain ways that I move, and the certain ways that I recover. When I do those things, I do them consistently and frequently. Even when my condition flares up now, Justin, rather than being down for 3, 4, sometimes a week, like literally a week, I get leveled. Like I would just basically have zero energy. I'd feel sick. I'd be in bed for a week. Now, 24 to 48 hours, I'm back. That is resiliency in action, okay? Even though I know that when I'm not doing the right things, when I fall off that wagon, I'm off for a while and it's way harder to get back on. However, if I'm maintaining certain things, my resiliency allows me to get back quicker. But resiliency doesn't happen by accident. You have to be intentional to develop it. And we all have access to this. This is sort of my closing comment, because people might be thinking, well, how do I develop resiliency? And I'm like, well, listen, you already got it. It's in your DNA. Look at how many humans we have on this planet. We're approaching 8 billion, I think, right now. Think about it, 8 billion people on this planet. And we are living as a population, humanity, in some pretty crazy areas on this planet. We got people living in the middle of the desert. We got people living in the middle of the Arctic. Yet they're still thriving in those settings, and wow, we've still populated this entire planet and consumed a lot of its consumables very well. I would say that we're pretty damn resilient as a species. Climate change people will be like, yeah, we're too resilient. But regardless, it's in our body. It's how we survive. Okay. Darwinism at its finest. Things under pressure either die or they evolve. Right. And I mean, I'm dumbing down the whole Darwinism here, but the theory of evolution, but that's really what it got down to. Hard things will either make us retract or allow us to thrive, but it's our choice what we do with it. Right. And I think that's where resiliency really comes in. It's the ability to bounce back in moments when we're dealing with big change and struggle. And so that's my sort of take on that, if you will.
Well, it sounds like resiliency through consistency, right?
Definitely. As long as you're doing the right things for the right reasons to produce the right results.
There you go. Okay, Dai,
because you know what it's like, Justin, to do the wrong things over and over again, right? And it's like, and we're expecting certain results, and if it doesn't happen, what do they call that again?
Insanity?
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, I challenged that though, because I went back and worked at a bar, and it worked for me. However, I do not encourage people to do that. If you're an addict or you struggle with substance abuse, do not go work at a bar. For me, I knew I made the change. It was a decision. There was no way. I knew where I was. I know who I am. I know where I'm going. You ain't stopping me. I can work wherever. I remember I told my buddy once, he's like, well, what's resilience to you? I'm like, I am resilient. Like, I know when I fall down, I will get back up. Because I'm not afraid to reach out my hand for somebody to grab it. Now, Dai,
you know what, Justin?
Yeah.
You do burpees, right?
No, the burpees.
Yes, well, you got to start doing burpees. You know why? Because burpees are the most resilient exercise. Okay. And here's why, because you got to become conditioned to get on the ground and get back up fast. What exercise allows you to do that?
Is that a French word? I don't know what the English.
The burpee. Yes, that's right. The burpee. And it is the most resilient exercise there is. So burpees, man.
You know,
burpees.
When I did your training thing with the rowing and then the burpees and then the rowing, man, and then the jump, that was pretty tough. But I did them. Don't like them, but I did them.
Yeah, dude, I'm so proud of you, Justin. Thank you for creating this space, but also thanks for the opportunity to be your first guest. I'm really honored by the opportunity.
Hey, man, I really appreciate you coming on. I just want to let everybody know, where can they find you?
Oh, well, that's the nice thing about having a unique name. I'm easy to find if you spell it right. And Dai is a Welsh name for David. So D-A-I. Last name is Manuel, which is Portuguese. I know people are like, what? Huh? Welsh and Portuguese? Yeah. I'm Canadian. Don't worry about it. Yeah, Dai Manuel. If you can type that into any social platform, you will find me. But I'm most active on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Those are my 3 preferred channels. Shoot me a DM, comment on a post. Please be patient. I'm the only one that does that stuff. I don't let a team manage my social or my communications because those things matter to me. I just ask people for a little bit of grace. Like, I will get back to you, but it might be a couple days. But please connect with me. Let's have a conversation. I'd like to hear about the big changes that you're making and how you're making them. And of course, if I can help, please ask. I'd love to help.
Yeah, what I like about his Instagram is he not only puts inspirational stuff, he puts lessons, he puts stuff on fitness, but he also lets us see his family. He lets us see his family and fun guy Dai. Sober.
Yeah, right.
Fun guy Dai.
Sober.
All right, Dai, thank you so much for coming to the show. And thank you to everyone who stopped by to listen to my incredible guest, Dai Manuel, today, to share his amazing story. Please be sure to check him out, give him a follow, and let him know. Direct message him. Let him know how he impacted your life today. Or if you want to work with him, just message him. He's an incredible guy to work with, caring, super fun, really energetic, likes burpees. I don't know if I can hold that against him, but I will put all his information in the show notes. And if you like this podcast episode, please be sure to like it, comment it, share it down below, and help us share this message. Thanks everyone for stopping by for the Stronger You Project.